face pointing at the camera like an Uncle Sam recruitment poster with the words printed in large letters, "You have a catheter." Before I sat down in the chair at the foot of his bed, I propped the poster up on the shelf just below a wall clock. Soon after he awoke. "Tony," he said, I've been expecting you." I went to his bedside, stood next to his IV pole, and took his hand. "How are you doing?" I asked. "Well, I got this," he said. He held up his hand with his forefinger and thumb together like he was holding a ticket. "What's that?" I said. "This. It's a $100 fine," he said. "Dad, where do you think you are?" I asked. "I'm in the courthouse." I crossed around to the opposite side of his bed. So I could get in closer, I sat down on his bed and looked him straight in the eye. "Dad, you're in the hospital." "What?" "You're in the hospital. You've been in the hospital for almost 2 weeks." He paused to consider what he clearly seemed to him unlikely. "This is so weird," he said. "What are you thinking?" I said. "Well, I think you're joshing with me, and I don't think it's very funny." "Dad, look at me. I would not joke with you about something like this." I know you wouldn't," he said, looking deep into my eyes. "You can trust me," I said. "I know I can." Then shrugging, resigned, he said, "If you say so, I'll believe whatever you tell me to believe, but this is just so weird." How do you explain that?" He pointed to the clock on the wall. "What?" That sign under the clock." I brought the sign to him and read it aloud. "You have a catheter." He burst into laughter. Then he said, "I'm waiting for Symington." "Who's Symington?" I said as I propped the poster back on the shelf. "My lawyer," he said. "I got this $100 fine for going to the movie." "What movie?" "I don't know," he said. "Dad, you're in the hospital." "I am?" Boy, oh boy, this is weird. Weird. What's that sign say again?" I brought the sign to him. Again he burst into laughter. Then referring to the sign, he said, "Doesn't everyone?" We both laughed. "Who made that sign?" he said. "Maybe it was." "You did?" Another burst of laughter. "You remember what you said when you were in the hospital before?" I said, "about this thing you called a bedazzlement." "Oh yeah," he said, as if his memory were all of a sudden perfect. And he could remember every moment of his life with the comedians, the ascension, he said. "This is sort of a bedazzlement we're having right now," I said. He laughed in agreement. "Oh boy, I sure am glad I have you to explain all this to me." "Me too," I said. "I wouldn't miss this for the world." Moved, he touched his chest with the flat of his hand. He told me he loved me very much. I told him that I loved him very much. And then I told him to wait a moment. I got a washcloth and crossed into the bathroom. I ran warm water under the washcloth and wrung it out. I crossed back to his bed. His brother, Les, had died a couple of years earlier. One of his last moments of aware communication occurred when my father visited him in the hospital. My father put a warm washcloth to his forehead. Les made a simple gesture of putting his hand on top of my father's. My cousin Diane told me the story when she called that afternoon. She asked if I would do the same for my father and tell him it was from Les. I laid the warm washcloth against my father's forehead. "This is from Les," I said. My father stared long into my eyes with the devotion of a lovesick dog. "Will you marry me?" he said. We both burst into laughter. "We'll have to do it in San Francisco," I said. "That's fine with me," he said. "The same-sex thing might not be a problem, but the father-son Oedipus Electra thing, they might have trouble with that," I said, "not to mention the fact that we're both still married." "Someone needs to write this down," he said. "This is choice material." Aristophanes would pay through the nose for this material, I said. We both roared with laughter. A nurse's aide took his vital signs. "I bet his oxygen level's pretty good," I said to the nurse's aide. "Oh, all his vital signs are very good," he said. "The antibiotic seems to be working." He left the room. My father said, "He looks very official." "That was the nurse's aide," I said, "if you say so." We laughed. Boy, This last half hour has been worth a lifetime, he said. Really, I said. You write this up, he said. I don't know if I can remember all this, I said. Well, if anybody can do it, you can. And I've got a title for it. The Night My Son Got Me Out of Jail. I imagine a local lockup, someone looking in the door and saying, what the fuck are those two up to? Where did this movie theater idea come in, I asked. Right now, we're in the basement of the movie theater, yeah. Dad, we're in the hospital. What? We're in the hospital. I showed him the poster again, he burst into laughter. This is choice, he said. I just wish we had a surveillance camera to catch all this, I said. You want the icing too, he said. We roared with laughter. You know, I don't know what doctors would think, I said. They ask questions like, do you know what day it is? Do you know who the president is? But this is so much more complicated. You're juggling all these realities at once. I know, he said, it's like peeling an onion. And then as if quoting the manuscript he'd asked me to write, he said, and he believed him. It's all about trust, isn't it? I said. Yeah, sure is. It's like an onion, and I just want to keep peeling it. This is Aristophanes. This is Borges, I said. He laughed. My father looked up the ceiling. Whenever you're ready. I mistakenly thought he got the punchline wrong. Anytime you're ready, CB, I said. I was shooting a little higher, he said. That summer, after he had been out of the hospital a few months, we went to a Kerry presidential rally in Dayton, looking to borrow an operational wheelchair for my father. We collected a few before settling on one that satisfied my mother. As we pulled the car away from my parents' house, my father looked back at the front porch, now crowded with walkers and wheelchairs, and said dryly, our front porch is starting to look like Lourdes. On December 2nd, 2006, the day before my father's 90th birthday, my mother and father moved into a duplex shared with Patty and her partner, Mary Ann. There they lived together in the protective glow of my sister and her partner's love for 2.5 years. Megan and I would visit, so would my daughter Paloma and her husband Wansi and their daughter Camila. When Patty's daughter Nathania was home from college, she would stay with Patty and Mary Ann and be a comforting fixture around my parents' new quarters. When my other sisters Barry and Wendy would visit, they too would join the circle of family. Then early in 2009, my father had a minor heart attack, which landed him back in a nursing home in Xenia. Sometime that summer, I came to visit around 10 in the morning. He was not in his room, but I could hear him talking to a nurse's aide in his bathroom. Soon the nurse's aide came out to get his wheelchair. When she saw me, she told me that my father wanted his grandchildren to know how proud he was of the kids in the neighborhood. When she wheeled him out of the bathroom, my father said to me, my spirit is very big. It's quivering. I asked him what he meant by spirit. He said it's not something you can see. I asked him if this was a new awareness. It was a growing, ongoing awareness, he said. My spirit is large, he said. This is what they mean by being blessed. He said he wanted his grandchildren to know how proud he was of the kids in the neighborhood. Who are these kids in the neighborhood, I asked. It's hard to talk about, he said. It's hard to talk about because it's difficult to find the words. Or is it difficult because your feelings towards them are so deep? All of that, he said. I think that's what it means to be blessed by the Spirit. It's not a big thing, he said. It's little. It's like a light being turned on. As best I could, I quoted from memory words ascribed to Christ from the Gospel of Thomas. He who knows himself will know the mystery of all things, I said. Even you can know God more deeply than I. To know, my father said. You have a deep sense of that now, I said. Yes, he said. I told him his brightness hurt my eyes. You're Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with the tablets, I said. He laughed and said, give him my greeting if you see him. I asked him if life was a charade, hiding from the mystery, or if it was pursuing of the mystery. He said it's all of that and more. Would you speak of the kids of the neighborhood? I asked again. Who do you mean? Do you know? There was a long pause. No. There was another long pause, and he said, ineffable. What does ineffable mean? I asked. In a sense, ineffable, he said, never being known, unknowable. Is that faith? I asked. There was another pause. Something like that, he said. A nurse peeked her head in and told him it was time for lunch. Patty and my mother also peeked in. I'll bring him right down, I told them. For a while, we just stared at each other. A tear rolled down one of his cheeks. I asked him, would you like to indulge in a little worldly activity? Would you like to eat? He laughed. Sure, he said. Would you like me to move you? Or would you like to move yourself? You are moving me, he said. And you move me, I told him. Good night, sweet prince. Flights of angels, sing thee to thy rest.